Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for all the support. It is so awesome and I really appreciate you guys continue watching these videos. I honestly didn't think I have a platform for my ideas or my thoughts, and it's just super cool that you guys take the time to comment and share your insights. I'm just some fool on the internet, so you guys make this an interesting journey and I can't wait to continually grow with you guys. Today we'll talk about how I grew up with a very unorthodox Asian mother and how I'm so thankful to her and how it shaped me and my perceptions of the world and the way I was raised. So a little background on myself. I was born in Vietnam and my mother is Vietnamese, but our nationality is Vietnamese, but they're actually Chinese. My family, my grandmother and her great-grandmother moved from China to Vietnam to escape the wave of communism. So they settled in Vietnam. They were like southern Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City. So I know in Vietnam there's like this Chinese Vietnamese community intermixing, and it's super interesting. So my mother is Vietnamese, and then they moved to the United States with me when I was like 9 months old in Denver, Colorado. So that's a little background. My mother is a very untraditional Asian mother compared to other Asian parents, right? When you think of Asian parents, you think of very strict, more like Asian tiger parenting. And I realized that's like really fucked up, and I can make a separate video on that. Tiger parents are people who are like helicopter parents equivalent, and they're very, very toxic. So pretty much my mother was such an amazing woman, right? She grew up in this traditional Asian background where like there's a patriarchy and women are kind of like there to support the man. And, there's not a very strong woman empowerment thing going on. It's kind of like the guy leads the house and women just kind of have to like follow and they can't really do anything. The traditional things of like cooking and cleaning. I'm not saying there's anything bad with it, and I greatly appreciate it, but I don't think there's like independence within the Asian culture as much as the Western world. So, growing up, my mother never pushed my brother and I to ever really get good grades. She never grounded us, and she never really like enforced any of her views upon us. I know with Asian parents, they force you to become like a doctor or a lawyer or like a pharmacist. And while that was like a little there because, think of where she grew up, she never really raised us that way. She raised us in a very liberal, modern way. And I definitely appreciate it. It gave me the freedom to think and believe and do what I want with the love of my mother. I think one thing that really shocked me was interacting with other Asian families growing up was seeing how strict they were. They were so controlling. And I want to say this is specific to Asian culture. Asian culture, every culture has it, but I'll say specifically in Asia, they're very, very like stern. Like they controlled like when they could like just simple things like watch TV, when they could go eat, but they had all these other activities planned, like sports, piano practice, like school, extracurriculars in school, and just like, I don't know, additional schoolwork. And that was like super surprising because, I was like growing up and I was like, Mom, like you never really raised us like this. She raised us in a very American way, which is, I'm super grateful. She assimilated the culture and realized like things that worked in Vietnam and China, they don't really work in the United States. And, obviously there's like things like working hard and work ethic, just stuff like that, perseverance and overcoming adversity. Well, that was instilled upon me. I'm super thankful. But it's never like this control thing of her shaping my life for me. She gave me the opportunity and the foundations of unconditional love and unconditional positive regard to become who I really am and explore the world in a healthy manner, and having her as a safe home base to support me. And I would say my mother, it was so interesting because I didn't grow up without a father. My father left, so I didn't really have a strong parental role. My mother kind of had to step in and be both, but also being a very feminine and traditional way, but without all the negative consequences of it. And I'm super thankful that my mother instilled in my brother and I with so much love. It aspired us to become better. In high school, I graduated 7th of my class with like a 4.8 GPA. And then in college, I had like a 3.75. So like, but done well in school. But my mother never forced us. She was never like, do this. She was like, hey, do your work, don't do your work. But I worked my butt off to get us to this country, and she worked as like a housekeeper to support my brother and I. I'm like, hey, like, look, it is super hard, like trying to be a single parent in America, especially as a woman not knowing English. And she only had a 4th grade education just due to Vietnam being very poor there. And it really made my brother and I, especially me, appreciate the sacrifices that she made. So it wanted me to do better. I realized that school was a privilege because she couldn't finish her school because she had to drop out in 4th grade and start working to support herself and her family. And that's so sad. Like she used to tell me these stories. And I was like, hey, while we may be poor, going to school is a privilege to get better. And it's the traditional way to success. And while Yes, you don't need schooling to become successful, but I'd say it's a lot easier to get to like, middle class if you take the traditional way. And there's nothing wrong with being a middle class. Getting middle class for me was a huge fucking success because if you grew up really poor, and especially as an immigrant, like you just want stability. The middle class does provide stability. Once you're at that stability, then you can rocket into any space you want. But I don't think going risky routes of like entrepreneurship or anything like that when you're just really, really poor like that was probably the best. I think schooling was like very important for me. I definitely enjoyed it. This traditional path worked for me. And school was a very important milestone in my success and who I am today. And I do kind of like the corporate world. There's a lot of flaws to it, but versus being like a freelance artist, I don't think that stability, I don't know. I value stability. That's just the way I was raised. And I'm not gonna say I don't like take inherent risks, but I definitely do take my time. I do evaluate options and risks to help benefit me. So I think that's the really amazing thing was just growing up, like my mother was like, hey, like, I want you to have fun and just be happy. She just loved that. She's like, you're awesome. You are so awesome. And just realized the opinions of others don't really matter. Like I remember going to like my friends' houses, everyone had like these strict routines of their parents being so controlling, telling them to do this, do this, do this, do that. I'm not saying mom never asked for help around the house, but she's like, hey, look, I work really hard. I would greatly appreciate if you and your brother could help out because I'm working these like 10, 12-hour days, 7 days a week. Nonstop. And I was like, wow, like I want to help out my mother. I want to do good in school. I want her to be proud of us. I want to make sure the sacrifices she's making, she could look herself in the mirror and be like, wow, this is worth it. I wanted my mother to be proud of me. And it was just like, I realized that she was proud of me by even trying, but I was like, you know what? I want to go and take that trophy home. If all these sacrifices she's making, I want to be number one. I want to go shit on everyone else who has all these resources that was raised in a 2-family household with a ton of money. Like we were really, really poor. We grew up in like Section 8, like government assisting housing growing up. It was like super rough. Like I remember going to school in elementary school. We didn't have like school supplies. Like fuck, we didn't even have a lunch some days, Yeah, it's quite depressing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do my best. And I realized like if I can do more with less, it's only going to help me. So I think this really developed idea of like, look, like I don't really care about the opinions of others as much as others. I mean, I do care on some inherent level. I'm human, but I have to realize like, hey, do I respect these people and what they're saying? Is it valid? And I realized like, no, people that are winning in life, they don't really fucking tear you down or have an opinion of themselves or you. They just do them. They focus on themselves. And I really have to admire my mother. Like, if you think about it, she grew up in a very, very patriarchal, like Asian culture where the woman is just there to supplicate and just compliment the guy, but never really make decisions of her own. And I can't imagine all the pressure she's had from my aunts and uncles of saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like you need them to do this. You need them to do this to become successful. They need to be a doctor, they need to be a lawyer, they need to be an accountant or engineer for you to be, valid. And my mom was kind of like, yo, like do what you guys want, but whatever you do your absolute best. And I'm really thankful that she kind of stood in this way because my mom was always made fun of. I didn't realize how much she was made fun of by other Asians and our extended family and just other Asians specifically, and they always just made fun of her, saying like your kids are come out like absolute fuck ups because first of all we were poor, and number one we were taking the not a non-traditional path to success or whatever you want to. It's just so strange because I look back now and see the evolving market. My mom was like avant-garde of her time. She was able to predict like the movement of America and like the job market. And the creative efforts has greatly impacted my life, and I feel like I'm better off because of it. Like first of all, I remember when I chose psychology, like as an Asian, it's seen as a soft science when I went to college. Holy crap, the amount of crap I got, my mom got. She was like, well, why would you do that? That is like the lowest paying job. Like, is he a fuck up? You fucked up. But I was like, look, I'm doing psychology at Cal Poly. I'm not doing this at some shitty fucking state school, and I worked my fucking ass off, and look at me now, right? I'm a consultant in DC and I'm super happy because I make good money and I can help my mother out and I'm just super content. And everyone that shitted on me from a very early age, I look at them and be like, look, thank you for hating me. Thank you. I use that as motivation to become better. And I'm living a great life, a life worth living. And I'm so thankful. And I don't want to say like success is the best revenge, but it kind of is on some inherent level. I'm living my life, but that is its message to them of realizing like, hey, I became successful despite everything you said, but I don't really care. I'm happy. I'm glad I stuck to my guns. But I really have to thank my non-traditional Asian mother for the way she raised me, and is realizing like, look, this is the life we live and you can decide what you want to do. And I'm like, how did she manage to do that? She came to this country not knowing any English, fourth grade education. My father left. I'm like, how did she do this? Like, my brother got a full ride, scholarship to college. I got a full ride. My brother's doing very well. He's in like the pharmaceutical field. And I'm a consultant. So I'm like, I'm really thankful for her to really do that. And I think the number one thing is my mom acknowledged like the inherent disadvantages of the Asian culture up front versus seeing the American culture at hand. My mom was very open-minded and had these open discussions with us and be like, hey, look, like, realize if you are dating and you date an Asian girl, realize there's like strings attached to it versus dating someone who's American and non-Asian. And that was a very interesting conversation growing up, was when you marry in the Asian culture, the other family owns you. You become like their property or asset. And especially if you marry in the girl's family, like, you are pretty much gone. Like, you have to go to their family events. And I'm not saying this is only specific to Asian culture, but it's more rigid, right? It's like their father and grandfather and uncles are like the leaders of this tribe. And then you have to do everything you can to fit and get their approval, versus being like, look, you marry someone for the individuality. It's you and them. It's no one else. You don't marry the family, you marry them. And I understand there's like familial influences upon that in any culture really, but it's more strict in the Asian culture. And she said, like, realize like your life will not be your own. They'll do everything they can to take you away from us, really. And at first I thought that was quite harsh and extreme, but the more I see it in people dating, I realized, you know, you have this mold you have to fit in and fill when you date within the Asian culture, versus if you just dated outside of it, you have that freedom that the Asian culture doesn't necessarily present. It's almost like there's a lot of like arranged marriages kind of coming together in the Asian culture of like, look, you marry my son, you marry my daughter, they're both going to be successful. But it's like, if you're in love, awesome. That works for some people. That doesn't really work for me. I grew up in a Western world. My mom saw the limitations of that. And she realized like, look, like, I want you guys to be happy. And if that's what you guys want, that's amazing. But she said, go and try and form the life of your own choosing. And that's like the most interesting thing that I realized was, growing up, I had so much freedom. I could do whatever I really wanted, but I was responsible. This only works if you're responsible, acknowledge hard work. My mother did. I'm not going to say I don't make mistakes, but I remember my mom was like, you know, I mean, I don't say this is best advice, but she was like, when we had dinner, she was like, why not have dessert first? Have dessert first, or have your entree first, or have whatever you want. You want to go to bed late? Sure, but you'll bear the consequences of having low sleep. And she was like, she didn't really have a curfew for us when I was in high school. For the Asian culture, that's super strange. She's like, hey, be out till the latest. Just don't get in trouble and just be responsible. To realize that your safety is my number one priority. But she's like, I know you're going to sneak out. I can't say anything. But she goes, be careful. I'm working really hard for you to become successful, and don't do anything that's going to be a detriment to your success in the future. Don't get in trouble with the law or others, or rub people the wrong ways. Don't get in fights. Don't, you know, do anything like drunk driving or drugs like that. But she's like, go out and have fun, right? You're a young guy. That's fine. But I was always very responsible, because if I was ever going to do something that's risky, I always thought of my mother, like, my mom did not work this hard to come to this country for me to do this thing that's going to fuck up the rest of my life. So I'm really thankful to my mother and the things she did. And I realized like a lot of my views aren't necessarily very Asian, just due to the way I was raised. Yes, I'm Asian, but I grew up in Denver, Colorado. I grew up with a very white Western influence. And my mother was very liberal in a way of raising us, right? Not liberal politically, but as liberal in the sense of just like this new age, right? Very Western, modern, contemporary. And I am super grateful to that. But I wouldn't say like a lot of my beliefs align with the Asian culture, which brings up like a really interesting point. Was I remember when we went to Vietnam, and this was the strangest thing. When I went to Vietnam, I was seen as too white, too American. And I've always had that problem, even within interacting with Asian communities in the United States. I'm seen as too white. This is the way I dress, the way I speak, the things I find interesting. I didn't really watch anime growing up, right? Just stuff like that. And then when I go and hang out with white people here, I'm seen as too Asian. But then when I go to like China, I'm seen as like this Westerner / Vietnamese guy. So it's like, am I transracial? Like, what the hell is going on? There's no mold to really fit yourself into. And that's why I won't say I'm like a complete like Asian rights activist, because it's like, I realized I dealt with the discrimination of being Asian, but I wouldn't really say that my inherent childhood or upbringing was Asian. It was American. It was very white and Caucasian just due to the location I was. So I don't think I'm the most, qualified person to speak on necessarily Asian things, because the only thing I have are like my looks, and my family looks Asian, but the way we kind of grew up and the way we interact is very Western. So it's like, what are you? We grew up in American culture. We're Americans. And that was a very phenomenal thing to realize, like, there is a stark contrast between American culture and Asian culture. And I definitely appreciate the freedom. And I'm so thankful to my mother. So this gives you a little background on my beliefs of why I believe the way things I do. It's because of the way I was raised. So thank you, Mom. I love you, and I appreciate everything you've done. If you have any questions, email me, bedroomtalksconsults@gmail.com, or follow me on Instagram @m.deep20, view in description. As always, I wish you guys the absolute best.